It's subtle, but it's building from God speaking in Deuteronomy, talking about appointing judges to help people deal with the issues. And those judges must not pervert justice. Those judges must be wise. Those judges must be able to speak. And then in 2 Corinthians, for one of the first churches, that this church trying to organize itself around Christ, around the message, that Paul even states if they're out of their mind, that actually means they're in Christ and with Christ, when they're in their mind, it's for you. All that is in reference to how to deal with one another, issues that come up. And now we have the words of Jesus from Matthew 15 through 22. Another example of Jesus explaining how to deal, you could say. So as we turn to the Word again, let us turn to God in prayer. Dear God, we thank you for this moment in our worship, that we center ourselves on your Word, the depth and the breadth of it. And we ask that your Spirit enter into our hearts that are so busy with what happened this last week, what is coming up this next week, that we just stop right now and let you enter in, brush the other stuff away. May your Spirit reside in us and give us will for our lives this day. Amen. Jesus says, if your brother sins against you, go and show him his fault, just between the two of you. If he listens to you, you have won your brother over. But if he will not listen, take one or two others along, so that every matter may be established by the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. If he refuses to listen to them, tell it to the church. And if he refuses to listen to the church, treat him as you would a pagan or a tax collector. I tell you the truth. Whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. Again, I tell you that if 2 of you on earth agree about anything you should ask for, it will be done for you by my Father in heaven. For where 2 or 3 come together in my name, there I am with them. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. So where have we been on this day? Right? We woke up. We remembered that we are God's beloved. And then we got up, and the first thing we did was we made the bed, right? Yeah, well, maybe not the first. But more importantly, what we did was we examined our habits and our rituals that we have, and maybe we thought about how we're on autopilot developing new ones. We talked this morning that we brushed our teeth then, which is important, not just for dental hygiene and your breath, and for others, right? Maybe that should be something. No. But it's important for body care. We're reminded that this what we have, we don't just have a mind up here that is only focused on God. Our mind is connected to our body, and it's a gift. Simple things like brushing your teeth remind you of that if you let them. And then, we're on our way out the door, but oh no, what happened? We lost our keys. Can't find them anywhere. Our day was perfectly planned. Is our whole day going to unravel now because we lost our keys? Well, maybe, some days, but it doesn't have to. This is a reminder that we're not perfect, and we have to confess our sins to God. So then, it's an ordinary day, and we get to work, and it's about lunchtime, and we warm up our leftovers in the microwave, right? It's not a dinner we'll never forget, but it is nourishment for our body, and we give thanks for it even in the moment. We tie that to receiving word and sacrament, nourishment. It feeds us body and soul, sometimes overlooked though, but there it is. And so we go on with our day, and now something unexpected happens again, kind of like losing your keys. You weren't planning on that, were you? No. But something happened. We got into a fight or an argument. Do you remember the last sizable argument you've been in? Anyone? With a spouse? With a child? With a grown child? Friend? Was it about an overbooked schedule that you misinterpreted or didn't understand the priorities of? Was it about money at the end of the month that you either didn't have enough of or it went someplace you weren't planning on it going? Was it about your child's education, what you think is right, versus maybe what the teacher said or something? Was it about, was it with a church member? Goodness, no. I mean, couldn't have been, right? So this ordinary day, we didn't plan on it. This fight happening. We didn't plan on it, but we could see it coming. You got into a strong disagreement, an argument with your spouse, with your dear friend, with your children, with your church member. So here's what I mean by not planning on it, but seeing it coming, because those things don't sound like they go together, but I think they do. Tish Harrison Warren, the author, correctly reflects on most fights that we do have, I think. Most fights that come up, as she described them with her husband. Because you see, most fights we have are hardly just about whatever the thing is that we've fought about, right? Most fights we have are about compounding and pressurized things that have built up over time that we have not dealt with or have struggled how to deal with, so we just let it be, and then they've over-pressurized whatever pot you want, or whatever metaphor you want to use, a pot on the stove getting ready to boil over. So the fight she describes is about this decision that her and her husband are making about her daughter's schooling. Okay? What her and her husband were really, though, fighting about, she says, as a pastor would, is about their fears and their anxieties, about their identities and these hopes. It all comes out under the issue of the daughter's schooling. That's what the fight is about. But like so many fights, it is about something much bigger than that. Whether you are married or not, whether you are a parent or not, you are called to be in relationships. You have intimate relationships. You have intimate relationships with one another, and it's hard. That's why there's biblical texts all the way throughout about dealing with each other in relationship. So you have that, and then we are called to be together, like brothers and sisters at this community called by God to be this thing called a church. Brothers and sisters. Let me ask you something. Who here has a brother or sister? Raise your hand if you got a sibling. That's a lot of you, okay? And if you don't, you have a close friend, you got a cousin, you got someone close with you. So let me ask you something about your brothers or sisters, your brotherly figure, your sisterly figure. Do your brothers and sisters fight? No. Do your brothers and sisters love one another down? Do your brothers and sisters have good intentions and overpromise sometimes and then underperform when it comes time to come through from time to time? Do you recall any of these moments in your either childhood or adulthood with siblings? So God said, Christ said, here's a great idea. Let's put 100 some odd, like we are here, brothers and sisters with different personalities and different ideals and different political thought and different income levels and different age and different parenting ideals and different visions of what worship should look like and be like and sound like and feel like, with different images of what mission should look like and feel like and be like, who should be served. And let's put them all together, and then let's unite them so they cannot come apart like a body. Brothers and sisters fight. Churches disagree, right? Churches fight. Some church fights are really clearly stated. It's like you walk into the church and you know this church is in some sort of fight. It's almost like there's a carpet color when you come in. And it's marked, ooh, that's the carpet color. Fight, right there. I know this church. I can smell it in the air almost. Cut the tension. That's some churches. That's not this one. But most church fights, I think, much less so the carpet color deal. Most church fights, I think, parallel fights in our own personal relationships that we have. You see, we are called to be patient and gentle and kind, but then there's this constant rub and constant challenge against this call. At home, Tish Harrison Warren names it when she writes this about fighting with her husband. She writes, "I'm not mad that you threw your shirt on the floor today. I'm mad about the last 300 times you've thrown your shirt on the floor." Isn't that true? But more painfully, more seriously, it's not just I'm mad about your criticism today. It's how this pattern of criticism, comment by passing comment, bumps up against my own patterns of sin, woundedness, and self-defensiveness. Now that's what more serious fights are about. This is the difficult truth of living out this relational life. But now and then again, here we are, called by God, together. God puts us into relationship with all sorts of one another's, yet God continually and constantly calls us to be constant and faithful seekers of God's peace. There's a Hebrew word for this peace that I'm talking about, and I know you've all heard it spoken. You mind turning the screen on for a second? It's actually one of the blank ones. Next one. Oh, never mind. That one, blank one, that one right there. It's hard to, but it's that bottom word right there. It says shalom, right? That's the word. And actually, this is kind of cool because the top part is actually, and you read it that way, that's the Hebrew for shalom going that way, the SH. And then it turns into the English shalom. Okay, now you can do whatever you want. God seeks us to find shalom in the world. God seeks us to find shalom with one another. God seeks us to find shalom at an intimate level in a world where your spouse or you are guilty of leaving the shirt on the floor. We're guilty of constantly leaving the light on. Or making the sarcastic remark. Or subtly sexist or subtly racist side comment. Over and over again. Finding shalom in this messy world is disciplined and holy work. It is of absolutely no coincidence that in ancient Israel, what we read about in Deuteronomy, God appointed holy and called judges to seek justice and what is right among the people. This was their particular calling to help find God's shalom. It is of no coincidence that Jesus taught multiple times that we have to find peace in our own intimate one-on-one relationships before we can find any sort of peace with God. It is of no coincidence that Paul wrote to the early church to live out what is called the ministry of reconciliation. God's people have always been charged to be seekers of peace. We have always been charged to be makers of peace and keepers of peace. And this can feel like this hugely worldly charge, right? What we often forget is that finding peace, finding God's shalom, that can't happen out there until it happens here. Shalom must begin individually. And then shalom must begin relationally. As Jesus instructed, go to your brother or your sister first. Have them listen. And then shalom has to happen corporately. And then shalom happens globally. I think shalom finding is difficult work because there's rarely this aha moment. Like in so many things we look for, there's not this aha moment of corporate or even sometimes relational peace. There's not a, there it is. Sometimes there is, and I thank God for those moments. But more specifically, finding peace corporately, it doesn't always mean that the shirts are going to magically stop being left on the floor. That people will just stop rubbing you the wrong way. That the side comments are just going to abruptly stop. Finding God's shalom does mean that you are, though, prepared, ready and able to deal with these relational realities in a mature way, in a Christian way, in a way that God would have us. And then, when that happens, something truly remarkable does begin to happen with God's shalom. Because when you have it and you feel it, and you can name it, and you carry yourself about it, and live into it, that does spread. It spreads kind of like the flu, but much, much, much better than that. God grows God's shalom among God's people. Scholar Matthew Schlimm describes shalom as a holistic peace. But not only that, he's an Old Testament scholar. He describes it as the goal for which creation yearns and has yearned for since the beginning. This shalom is central to God's plan for the world. It is central to the text of the Bible, both Old Testament and New. In the midst of Old Testament violence, a very violent world, it was Isaiah and Micah who joined in one chorus, speaking of a time that's free from weapons of violence and of warfare. They speak of God's shalom. Isaiah and Revelation promise us of the image of a new heaven and a new earth, one that is perfect and at peace. It is shalom. God yearns for shalom to be upon this earth. And we read that, and we consider it, and it's a future vision so often, shalom. But I believe God's shalom is not something that we just wait for to happen to us, or to happen someday, and I'll take part in it. God's shalom, God's holistic peace for your life, it is attainable now. But it takes holy work to obtain it, and the discipline to live into it. But once it's received, and I think you've felt it before, it is inescapable. Many churches during their worship pass the peace of Christ, right? As a part of their regular worship service. And some of you thinking, we used to do that, right? We did. It used to be a part of this worship, and I think it probably will be again soon. But not during flu season. It won't. Not today. Maybe when the snow melts. That'll be our sign to do that. But passing the peace is a way during worship, and it's placed in worship very intentionally, no matter the tradition who does it you're in. We do it. Do you remember where it used to be in our worship right after the prayer of confession? So we have gathered up God's peace, right? And then it's an opportunity to go to your brother and your sister and say, the peace of Christ is with you. It's an intentional moment for us to act out. And while we don't do it every Sunday anymore, we haven't done it in some time, it's the words that matter. It's the words in it that matter. When we truly say, the peace of Christ be with you. Those words matter. And so while we don't do it often, right now is an opportunity, I think, for us to do it at this moment. So I say, the peace of Christ be with you. And what would you say?
Also with you.
Okay. Say it like you believe it, right? The peace of Christ be with you.
And also with you.
The shalom of God be with you.
And also with you.
The peace of Christ be with you.
And also with you.
Thanks be to God. Our next sermon on liturgy of the ordinary. Well, I didn't write it down, so I don't know what it is. It's in the newsletter. How about that?